There's no news. No news at all. Nothing.
Let's see.
I will say something about this. Like, and again, maybe my definition has changed, but I keep seeing this referred to as a blockbuster. Like, there's one important player in this trade. Like, a blockbuster to me is when multiple players of impact. Now, this was a 9-player swap, so that makes it interesting.
This is a big dump deal, and I'm not. There's a negative connotation to that, but I mean, essentially, it's a salary dump deal on both sides. But yeah,
it's herbal cleansing of sorts, Mike.
Yeah, it's exactly.
Sometimes a cleansing could be satisfying, though. So let's not
exactly. I mean,
here we go.
This is the benefiber of NHL trades.
Well, let's rock and roll on this because.
All right, here we go. Ready? Dan should be.
Say it was robust.
As well soon, so we'll get right into that, and we'll leave the discussion for the Puppy Bowl tomorrow. All right. The 9th. Hello, Hockey World. How you doing? What's up? It's Tuesday, February 9th, 2015.
No.
15.
Take 2.
Hello, Hockey World. How you doing? It's Tuesday, February 9th, 2016.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, USA Today.
And I am Eklund, and we are not part of a 9-player trade. But we are here talking to you about
a 9-player trade.
A 9-player trade. So, yeah, let's I had so many other things I was going to talk about today, and I was writing my DM Enough blog right before the trade happened.
So was I.
I know. And, this is really definitely shaking the hockey world to its core, but Kevin had discussed it, this is not necessarily a blockbuster. I do agree with that. But getting rid of Enough is a big deal.
Yes.
And it sounds horrible to say hello, Dan.
Hello.
We have also joined by Dan Petru there.
That's a heck of a shot right there.
Heck of a shot.
No, we're not talking about you. We're talking about Kevin Allen's arm.
Oh, okay.
Kevin's forearm. That was a good one.
Everything's good. Yep, and Dion Phaneuf will wear number 2 for the Ottawa Senators. Just throwing that out there if you're curious. No, but so the 9 players, I never really imagined. I've been one of those ones all along. I will admit that I was wrong. I just didn't think that you could trade Dion Phaneuf. I did not think it was possible. Kevin, you said it was always possible.
Well, I did, but it took some work. Like, my take on this trade was this was a very well-crafted trade, and that everybody should be happy by it, because the objective of the Maple Leafs is to try to get rid of Dion Phaneuf's salary, to clear up their cap situation, at the same time getting some value for him. Now, initially they were trying to get a first-round pick or a top prospect, and the problem was, and Mike can attest to that, is that teams around the NHL were saying, look, this is a salary dump. We look at this as we're helping you out, so we don't want to give up any assets in order to do that. So from the Maple Leafs perspective, they have rid themselves of Phaneuf's salary, and they got an asset back. They picked up a draft pick, out of the deal, and it could be a top 50, pick depending on what happens. So they get a little something out of it, and the Senators get a guy that I think will help them. Like, they're in a situation where I think a guy like Phaneuf actually fits in pretty well with them. He's a rugged guy, and has a little bit of an offensive knack, and they have a good offensive team. I think he'll be recharged by all this, and so I think, and they're I've heard that the Senators have said publicly that they feel like he'll help them for the duration of his contract. So they're all in on Dion Phaneuf. So I thought this was a pretty interesting trade, and I think the timing of it was perfect because, there's going to be a lot of moves that the Maple Leafs are going to try to make. Now they've got the most complicated one done, and they can concentrate on the little moves. And I think the Senators, I looked 4 back, played really well their last 2 games. If they waited until February 29th, it might have been too late. So, they strike early. So I think this was a really well-designed move by 2 general managers who are accustomed to, figuring these kind of things out.
This is definitely an experienced GM move. Agreed there. These are 2 experienced guys putting this together. Mike?
I have to tip my hat to Lou Lamoriello, first of all, because I didn't think it was possible for them to trade Phaneuf without retaining at least $1 million or $1.5 million of his salary. And after the Bufflin deal yesterday, I thought things were looking up in terms of them being able to move Phaneuf because there really weren't any other big options other than Yandel out there, and that maybe that would stimulate the trade market. But from what Brian Murray said, that the trade discussions for this deal started in earnest on Saturday. And if you look at it, I mean, Ottawa has Chris Phillips retiring probably at the end of the year. They clear about $9 million in cap space for next year. Mahalik has been injured. He's the Joffrey Lupul of Ottawa, basically, continuously out in terms of injury. Jared Cowan is underachieved as a 25-year-old defenseman, a former first-round pick. And Colin Greening, after signing a mid-level type of deal, gets sent to the minors, so he was making over $2 million. From the Leafs, the most important thing is not a penny of Phaneuf's $7 million salary going forward for the next 5 years. The rest of the players are minor prospects or AHL guys. I think Lindbergh, he was in the SHL for a couple years, played with Oshawa last year, and is doing okay in his rookie season in Binghamton, 22 points. He's maybe a grade B prospect that they can give a look at. But the most important thing here is, as Kevin said, clearing the salary down the road. And as I've said on previous webcasts, if they moved Phaneuf, this is another step in the direction. In July, if Mr. Stamkos hits free agency, now they don't have to worry about having Phaneuf's contract
That's for sure.
and on the books with Stamkos. Now I think they have the freedom to offer Stamkos the most in the NHL.
Yep.
Because that money is not there anymore.
If only we had a premier prospects person on the show to talk about these players that we don't understand.
Yeah, we need to get one of those guys.
Oh, wait a second. We've got Russ Cohen.
Well, there are no premier prospects, so.
Right.
But Russ, tell us what really. I mean, you're the one person who can probably say what actually happened in this trade. Like, to everybody else, it's like, okay, Phaneuf got traded.
Well, I'll give you an analogy. Kevin will probably hate it, but it was sort of like a garage sale, and Ottawa paid a lot for like that antique lamp, and that's. but Phaneuf can play. Look, Phaneuf will be very good for Ottawa, but he's at a high salary. Ottawa gave up like their 5th or 6th best prospect, so it's not that big of a deal for them to give up Tobias Lindbergh, who's a big guy who can move the puck. He has some finesse. He can play some penalty kill. He'll score some points. Maybe he'll make it to the NHL. What happens here, kind of like what's going under the radar, is the Marlies have gotten a lot better, and maybe the Marlies are now the Calder Cup leader because they added quadruple A talent to their roster, and they're going to be able to make a deep run. And so that's something that eventually someone will figure out. But as far as the prospect end, not that big a deal. The Phaneuf thing is interesting because at his draft, I was at the luncheon that they always have in the NHL, and I was standing behind Phaneuf, and we were all sort of looking at the Norris Trophy. They had it there, and he was gazing at it, and I was gazing at it, and I was thinking to myself, this guy's going to be like a Norris Trophy guy one year. He's definitely going to be. And, down the road now, he's a 3-time All-Star. He's never even had, like, serious Norris votes. So he's sort of like a good defenseman. Maybe he had 2 great years, 3 great years, and now he's sort of like not a journeyman, but a little bit like a notch above a journeyman. Still a valuable guy in the NHL, but Ottawa, they gave up a second rounder. Now that second rounder's in 2017.
Yeah.
Yep.
So again, doesn't even impact them this year. The Leafs really they lost salary, and they get a pick, and the Marlies got better. That's what really happened. The Lou Lamoriello, I did hear some of the presser, and the sales job that he did on the trade and Lindbergh and Phaneuf was grade A. I have to give Lou a lot of credit for that.
Artful.
It was artful.
Well, that is Lou, right? And here, of course, the Ottawa Senators store has already gotten the Phaneuf jerseys up in the window. This is amazing.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
yeah, this doesn't take long, so if you're all set, there it is.
I'll tell you this. You know what's funny about that? The day Eric Lindros played his first game for the Rangers, I was at that game. I was covering it, and somebody did have a jersey on, And that was even back then when they weren't even as fast as they are now. And I remember taking a picture of it like, there's always somebody. So, of course, there'll be a couple of guys that will have Phaneuf jerseys right away.
Oh, yeah. No, it's amazing. I mean, I remember a friend of mine, might have been my friend you saw, because he actually bought a Lindros jersey as a Ranger fan when the whole thing was going down, whether he had been traded to the Flyers or the Rangers.
Oh, wow.
He actually went out ahead of time thinking that he was going to definitely go to the Rangers. He bought a Lindros jersey back then.
Wow.
Well, it eventually worked out.
It was a slow play. It was like one of those slow plays.
It was. He eventually had his moment in the sun. It's rare that you buy a jersey before a player gets there by several years. You usually have a jersey that's gone and the player's gone.
One of the things I want to get what Dan thinks of this deal, but one of the things I think is most interesting here is the Leafs have sort of loaded up with their future rentals in this deal. If Mihalik has one more year at $4 million, if he could actually stay healthy next year, maybe he's somebody that the Leafs can trade at the deadline. Greening, it's a fresh start for him after being in the Ottawa Senators organization for years. Cowan is interesting because he's got another year at over $3 million, but he's got one of those contracts that if a team buys him out since he's 25 years old, they actually would get some sort of credit against the salary cap. It wouldn't be half of his salary. It would be, well, usually it's 1/3, but for some reason, some quirk of the cap, the team that has him and buys him out would get a credit of $600,000
and a free dessert, with chicken wings purchased.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that might be attractive to some other teams, so they could maybe flip one of these guys at the deadline or just hold on to them.
But let's say what Cowan is. Like he was a guy that was a highly touted prospect who had injuries. Injuries sort of turned him into the defenseman that he is today, sort of like Thomas Hickey. Same thing. So now you're really talking about a bottom pairing guy who can play some physical play, isn't a great skater though.
Right. Yeah, and when the Leafs trade Polak, which they're going to do probably before the 29th, they have at least an NHL defenseman who will be part. They won't have to call up the Stuart Percys or the Renat Valievs from the AHL. They could have at least an NHL body there to play the rest of the season.
No, I think you're right. I think this is both Mihalik and Cowan they're like placeholders. They're placeholders for this year and maybe part of next year too. And then maybe if they play well, like some of the guys you've had this year on one-year deals, you can flip them for more picks. And Toronto's going to be loaded with picks. The best move for the Maple Leafs here is getting rid of Phaneuf's contract without having to eat any of it. I think it's a no-win situation. You guys should have heard how giddy Mike was. He called me when I was in CVS. And he was just downright giddy. He's like, I can't believe it happened.
No. I was giddy about the fact that there was a trade to actually talk about. Come on.
Yeah. I don't know. I think if Lee Stepniak was traded today, you wouldn't have such joy.
Well, he's on the Devils. He's on the Devils, so I don't care about that.
Yeah.
No, I think that this is, it's interesting that we are seeing some different kinds of trades in the NHL right now. That's what I was thinking. Just trying to take the whole perspective of this thing. Ryan Johansson for Seth Jones is sort of an very old school trade that we haven't seen too many of those lately. This is a very.
It seems like an NBA trade almost.
This is like an NBA trade, totally.
Contracts
an NBA trade.
Totally involved.
No,
NBA trades were eventually going to start happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, where the players' salaries are being moved around. Not even the players, like happens in the NBA. I mean, so
the only difference is these players will all get utilized.
Right.
In the NBA, sometimes those players never even show up.
Keith Van Orn was on 7 different teams for 10 years and he'd been retired, and his contract just kept getting traded and traded and traded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, we haven't reached that level yet.
Well, Chris Pronger's the only one.
Mark Savard.
And Mark Savard.
And
Nathan Horton. It's going to be.
That's true. They have.
Yeah,
there are some for sure.
We haven't seen yet though is the NBA style sign and trade.
Right.
No,
right.
Which we will see at some point.
I mean, think so too.
It would actually make some sense for Stamkos if.
I agree.
It would. And are we seeing like the salary cap? I mean, we're seeing the salary cap take hold fully, which it's been here for a long time now, so it's hard to say, that's 10 years now, but we're starting to see it fully take, and we're seeing the NHL turn into what other salary caps leagues have been doing before. It's no different. It was easy to follow the trend where this would go, right? Because we've seen salary cap leagues.
It rules the sport. It does. I mean, it's not like the old NFL salary cap where the 49ers can just do whatever they want with it, and can circumvent it every minute. I mean, the Flyers do a pretty good job of circumventing the cap, but they have limits. and some other teams have done a decent job of circumventing. But this cap, while it can any cap can be circumvented, but this one, there's a limit to it. And now we're starting to see where it's very rigid.
The one thing about this trade that's important to note, though, is it really was a perfect storm in terms of being a perfect fit. Like a lot of the teams that are capped out or at the limit of their budget, you look at their roster and you go, well, who in the world could they move off that roster? Like, they need all those guys. Like Red Wings are capped out, but they don't have anybody to take off their roster. Like people think Kyle Quincy, but Kyle Quincy is one of their most top 3 defensemen. They can't really take out. I mean, from the outside looking in, you say, well, you just take him out. But in this case, the Senators were able to move 3 guys that they wanted to get rid of. Like they those are deal. So it was a perfect crossover.
Right.
They were able. They had players on their roster that they were looking to get rid of. So they were able to give them to Toronto. So as well crafted as this trade was, there had to be a perfect setup. Like, they were perfect trading partners, and nobody had really seen that, prior to the deal.
That's true. That's true, and it is, it is. These are rivals. I mean, these are bitter rivals. Making this trade. 2 Ontario teams.
But one of them is not in contention.
Right. One of them is not in contention.
Right.
But both are young. I mean, Ottawa's young for the most part. That I see Ottawa as a young team, and it's
but they're more mature in terms of where they're at. They're far more mature, really.
Yeah, they are far more mature. But
and it helps both team in their short-term goals. I mean, the subtraction of Phaneuf from the Leafs roster, and then obviously the subtraction of Polak is going to make their NHL defense not that good. It's they have some injuries right now with Matthias and Lupul and Bozak. I mean, their top 3 forward salaries are all injured right now. Bozak, Van Riemsdyk, and Lupul. And it's going to help Ottawa in the sense that they're just out of the playoff race right now. You add Phaneuf to their second defensive pairing with Cody Ceci on top of Carlson and Mathot. And if they get good goaltending out of Anderson and they can start generating some offense, maybe they have a chance to climb back in the playoff race. So I think it's beneficial for both teams, but I also think, as Kevin said, it was a perfect storm for Ottawa to be able to take on all that salary. It was also a perfect storm for Toronto because they have all that cap room available that they could take back $9 million of salary in the deal, and they still have a ton of cap room, and they have a guy like Robidas who they can put on long-term injury as well. So they're going to have $8 or $9 million at the cap. They're going to be probably doing deals like this before February 29th, where they're going to take players back in deals, and that's the way they're going to get higher draft picks.
Well, that's definitely just for the Senators, real quick. With the acquisition of Phaneuf, that's a much better looking top 4.
Yeah.
No, it is definitely.
About this. If I'm a Leafs season ticket holder and they do make 2 or more, 3 or more of these deals, I mean, the Leafs essentially then turn into like the 76ers in basketball, and I'm now paying, $50, $55 a seat, and they're barely ever going to win a game.
They do for a couple of weeks, though. But I think if you're smart enough, I don't think I'm not going to. We get in this conversation about tanking all the time. I think the Maple Leafs are aligning themselves to be in the best position to get either Matthews or one of those 2 Finns, and that's what they need.
No, they are. I mean, there's no question they are. I'm just saying for 2 months of the season they could be like that.
Oh, they could. Go ahead.
And let's not, forget the Mike Babcock factor. I swear that I believe that he could take an AHL team and not get into the playoffs, but make it competitive. I mean, we saw him do that, 2 seasons ago when I remember in one game because of all the injuries, he had 13 guys from the farm team, and
I remember that.
And that team was really playing well. I mean, that he basically had minor leaguers for the bulk of the season in key roles, and he got a team in the playoffs. So no matter how they strip it down, and this is my response to your about how the fans would be disappointed. I think he'll still make that team as competitive. Like, you won't feel like it won't be like the Sabres were at the start of last year.
They'll work hard. No matter who's on that team, they're going to work hard. And I think you're okay with that.
They'll be worth the price of admission.
Yeah, they'll work hard, but they're at the end on March 1st. There will be so little talent there that even though they work hard, they're not going to win much. And the one final thing of this deal that really surprised me is Phaneuf had a limited no trade clause. There were 10 teams that he would accept, they didn't have to ask him to waive to go to. So
Right.
Ottawa was one of the 10 teams he said he would go to without waiving, which is surprising because it's not exactly, a Dallas or a Los Angeles, like a big market or closer to where his wife would be in L.A. For her job as an actress. Ottawa is actually more remote of a hockey market in terms of it's the capital of Canada, and it's a Canadian hockey market, but it's not a big metropolis like Toronto, and he's sort of going to blend into the woodwork there because he's not the captain. Carlson is the captain, and he's just going to be a support player. So I'm surprised he had them on his list of 10 teams he would accept to.
But I think that's okay. I think that's okay for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably what he wants at this point in his career.
Probably another connection that we're not thinking about too. Like usually when players are willing to go someplace, there's some kind of connection, like with a coach that they had in the past, or some player on that team that they're buddies
Well,
with.
his cousin is on the team.
Who's that?
Clark MacArthur is his second cousin.
Speaking of Carlson, we had a debate on Monday in USA Today, and I thought it was actually kind of interesting because nobody's really talking about Carlson, or at least not much, for MVP. But, at that point in time, he was second in the league in the scoring race, and we haven't had anybody defenseman do that since '84.
Right.
And before then, it was Bobby Orr in '74. And now all of a sudden, Carlson is, right there putting up numbers. And the question that Jimmy Haskip who's essentially the hockey editor, posed is he deserving of our trophy consideration? And it's an interesting debate because when you start to look at the concept most valuable to your team, and I argued that considered yes, but a favorite no, and my rationale was that Holtby and Kane have done as much for their teams, and their teams are contenders. And my argument was the Blackhawks are better than we expected them to be, and Kane was the main reason for the first 2 months of the season. And the Capitals, although we expect them to be good, we didn't expect them to be this good, and I think Holtby is the primary reason on that. And the Senators are essentially where we thought they would be.
Right.
As good as he's been, he hasn't been able to lift them beyond where everybody said, well, they'll be in there battling for a playoff spot, but,
Yeah,
so,
it's
anyway,
yeah.
but I think it's an interesting thought that Carlson has been pretty dramatic and pretty dynamic, and has really on most nights, if he plays well, the Senators can win, and if he doesn't, they can't.
Here's the funny thing about that, Kev, and it is a great thought. Has there ever been a defenseman that's won the Hart and not the Norris? I don't think so, right?
That's a good question.
No, I can't imagine that's true. So, yeah, and right now I would say, but to be honest, all the points he's put up lately, I wonder now if he's sort of soared beyond. Like, to me, this is Doughty's year, but Carlson has been, the number of points he's put up is so incredible. I mean, Bobby McKenzie put forth the argument a couple or 3 years ago that, yeah, the Norris Trophy should be a two-way, but at some point, the point level becomes so staggering and overwhelming that has to take precedence. You just got to say, hey, that's the guy. And we might be there with Carlson.
Yeah, and Carlson has been forced to play on some nights over 30 minutes because they're so short on the blue line. And then again, that's again another point in favor of the deal for Phaneuf. I mean, Phaneuf can play 22, 23 minutes a night, so you can maybe take a little bit of the burden off of Mathot and Carlson, and that will give Ottawa a little better chance to if they can climb back into the playoff race. It would help.
But here's a question for the panel, and I think everybody should answer this because I think it's interesting. Since I'm older, and when I was a young man, there was, we called it the George Gervin syndrome, but essentially George Gervin played for a terrible team, but he was a great NBA player. And the question was, as we always pose, is did he have all those points because all he had to worry about was scoring? Like the team was never going to win, so he didn't have. So my point is if Carlson played for Sutter in L.A. or Quinville in Chicago, would he be able to put up all these points because they have other objectives than Carlson putting up his points, and he would not be the only reason why they were winning or losing. So, like Doughty
does make a lot of mistakes. I mean, he would be called on the carpet. I mean, you watch him play; he makes plenty of mistakes.
Here's what I think. I think yes, he would, because at every level that I've ever seen him play, he has always been, if not the best power play quarterback defenseman, one of the 2 or 3 best, no matter where he's been, no matter what the tournament. He always gets his points. Yes, he's always going to make mistakes, but you forgive a guy that could score 75 points in a year if he makes mistakes.
No, but there's also something about scoring points when the team's under pressure, like Kevin's saying. Like there are players who are better points producers on bad teams. We've seen it, and it's hard to say whether or not Carlson's hasn't really been on a top team in the NHL.
Yeah, but they made the playoffs last year, and they went on that great run because they had a goalie who could stop the puck, and he was phenomenal.
No, he was phenomenal, no question about it. But under what did he do in the playoffs under pressure? Like Carlson's points in the playoffs, not the greatest if I remember right. I mean.
Their downfall was the fact that reality hit Hammond, and they had to go back to Anderson.
Yeah, actually, I was not even, because I think Carlson does perform well under pressure. I wasn't making the case that he would not, play as well. Well, the point I was just making is that there wouldn't be as many opportunities for points because you have to concentrate on.
I agree with that. I do agree with that, but I think they go hand in hand to a degree.
It's sort of the Doughty syndrome. If Doughty played on the Blackhawks, like he might get more points than he gets in LA, where they play a specific style. Because I always find he looks a lot more offensive when he plays for the Canadian Olympic team.
Yeah,
right.
And we've seen him offensively dynamic, but he doesn't do it very often because.
Carlson has to play that way because their offense is challenged. I mean, Kyle Turris is a fine center, but he's not a number one. He's not a prototypical number one center, and he's forced to be in that position. Yeah. And they really don't have a genuine number two center. Zibanejad hasn't really filled that role adequately. So I think he's got to take more chances to generate offense, and that's why he plays so.
Here's my MVP definition. Ready? This is how you define MVP. Take that player off the team, and where are they? That's how I've always done it. Just like.
They'd be lost without him. I'm pretty sure.
Look at. Carey Price is the perfect example, right? Carey Price could have been MVP. You take him off the Canadians. Where are they? That's an extreme example, and it's not all Carey Price, right? But where are they, right? So you've got. Here, if you take him off of the Sens, you probably. Where are they? Are they still battling for a playoff spot without him?
Their number one defenseman would be Mark Mathot.
Yeah, that would be bad. In his last 2 playoffs, he has 12 points in 16 games. That's really good.
That's not terrible.
That's not terrible.
Not terrible.
That's really good.
That's good. That's really good. I mean, Patrick.
I was thinking of him as a forward for a second. I'm like, no, wait a second.
Yeah, no. If you take Patrick Kane off the Blackhawks, where are they? Are they? Where are the Caps without Holtby? To me, like this is how you find your MVP. This is how you. Where
are the Panthers without Roberto Luongo?
Right. I mean, it's and in a way, it's funny that the coaches, who take lower teams to higher levels are always elevated in the awards. Kevin, they are.
Yeah. And that's why Joel Quenneville can't win. I mean, Joel Quenneville.
Exactly.
I tried to squeeze him in this year, but. I got Gallant in. I can't squeeze Quenneville in my top.
Right.
Because I feel you got to give Hines some credit, some love, and I think Barry Trotz deserves some love too.
Yeah.
So.
Here's the funny thing. I'm going to give you something funny, Ak, and this is where statistics are non-biased. Where there's people that have a bias against Erik Karlsson, and I told you that like weeks ago.
Yes, I do.
Where there was a non-Norris talk on Hockey Reference. They compare him to like Brad Park and Mark Howe. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Point wise.
Right.
2 Hall of Famers.
Yeah, the 2 Hall of Famers. Dan, you were saying?
Well, I think that just Kevin's point about the coaches. I think Joel Quenneville's become Joe Torre. Like no matter what he does, no matter what he does each year, everybody expects Chicago to be really good. So he never really gets the credit he deserves.
He makes the pieces fit. And that's you give Stan Bowman a lot of credit for carrying apart part of that team after the 3 cup wins and finding the pieces. But the thing is, it takes the coach to be able to make those pieces fit together in a team situation that will make them win. I mean, nobody knew that Panarin was going to be as impactful as he was this year, but Quenneville
Kevin
knew.
did. Kevin picked him as the rookie of the year before the season
Well,
started. That's
but what I'm saying, because nobody
show.
knew that he would be this impactful playing with Patrick Kane. I mean, it helps to have Patrick Kane, but he could have put him on a third. There are some coaches out there who would have put him on a third or fourth line because he wasn't good enough defensively. But Quenneville knew, I put him on a scoring line with Kane, and let's see what happens. And now we see what happens.
It's like every year, Stan Bowman keeps the foundation of the house the same, but he gives Quenneville maybe some new siding, a couple new windows and doors, and he's like, here, make this house look the same.
Not bad when your foundation is Keith, Kane, Taves, and Crawford and Seabrook.
Yeah, that's pretty.
I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, like Panarin to me is Esa Tikkanen. Okay, like remember when Esa Tikkanen came into the NHL? You know, he was suddenly a superstar, but he was playing with Curry and Gretzky.
Yep.
I remember like the first I saw the first game that I think Esa Tikkanen ever played in the NHL was, if I remember right, in the Stanley Cup Finals. Against the Flyers at that point. I'm pretty sure that's true. He may have played before that, but I remember that was when you could just come over at any point, I think. Check that out, but I'm not sure. I think that's true. It's because I remember we at the game, who is this guy on the wing with Gretzky and Curry? And I mean so Panarin is he's a great rookie. He's incredibly talented, but it doesn't hurt to play with Patrick Kane and Chicago Blackhawks.
What I find the most interesting about Quenneville is every coach has their style, and every coach has sort of what we know him by. With Hitchcock, we think of defensive hockey. Julian is the same way. Peter Laviolette, as we think, is an offensive coach. There are grumpy coaches and disciplinarians, guys that like physical play. But what I've always noted about Quenneville is what I note about him is he wants at least one fast guy on every line. Like he spreads his speed out through his lineup. But the other thing is he's really picky about his defensemen. And if you look at their history, like if he doesn't think you can fit in his system, right, he doesn't have much time for you. Like you're just gone in a hurry.
Nick Leddy couldn't fit
there. Nick Leddy, but to lesser, and Rundblad is another one that I remember Bowman was so excited to get him in that deal. He thought he was sort of a diamond in the rough, and Quenneville decided early that he didn't think he'd fit. And we all saw him last year in the final. We debated ad nauseum, about whether or not this team would be tired because they weren't playing their fifth and sixth defensemen. But to me, that's one of the things. I mean, Patrick Waugh gets credit for changing the way we pull goalies and everything, but I think Quenneville has sort of changed the way that coaches look at defensemen now in terms of, like, he has no issue cutting his defensive group down to 4 key players and spotting even the 5th and 6th. Like, some guys were willing to rotate 5, but he'll rotate 4 if it comes.
No, that's really true, and he's made that work for sure. So had this not happened today, we would have been talking about the Jets signing Dustin Byfuglien, right? Because this is another small, the trade deadline has really been defined a lot in the last 12 to 24 hours here.
Sure has.
So Dustin Byfuglien, has signed an extension, a 5-year deal, $7.5 million roughly, kind of what we were talking about, was being reported out there. 5 years, I think, is a bonus for Winnipeg. I was really surprised that they could get him for 5 years. It does show to me that Dustin wanted to play in Winnipeg. That's at the end of the day. Because people can always say that, and they always wonder, do they really want to play in Winnipeg? But he did want to play in Winnipeg for him to sign this deal.
Remember, I was saying I wouldn't give him more than 5, and I even said the day that Byfuglien said, "Hey, I want to stay there," and I was basically like, "Well, then sign a 5-year deal," and he did. So I give him credit.
This seems like a fair deal for the player and the team. This seems like that's market value.
That's the point here. That reason and fairness won out, and that usually isn't the case. He is the type of player that shouldn't be given at this stage of his career a 7-year deal. Everybody in the NHL knew that. I had talked to several GMs who felt like it was going to be hard for him to get a 7-year deal out even in there. That maybe somebody would have done it, but it would have been a team that Byfuglien wouldn't have wanted to play for. Right. Like a contending team was not going to give him a 7-year deal. So what Winnipeg did is the right thing. They said, look, we only want to sign you for 5 years, but we'll give you more, with the 5-year deal. I mean, it was a fair and reasonable approach that both sides took, and it was important for Winnipeg, who has to establish that players want to play there, and it's not that far from Minnesota. That's the key thing for Buffalo. It's a quick plane. Yeah, quick plane trip back to, his home state, and this was just a really good deal, and all of those really sort of upsets the trade market, because he was really the major player in the trade market. So now that he's gone,
Well, I mean, he's now making a top 5 defensive salary. I mean, the only ones I can think of right now are Subban and Letang that might be making more. But he's, but the thing is that, and you were just talking about the trade market. You look at it right now, and other than Yandel, the list of the available defensemen, there are UFAs out there, but Dallas is not going to trade Alex Goligoski. No. And Florida is not going to trade Brian Campbell. So the top defensemen out there to be traded by February 29th are Dan Hamhuis and Roman Polak and maybe a couple others.
And Vancouver has implied they might not even trade Ben, or Benning has implied they may not even trade Hamhuis. So anyway.
Yeah, but remember when I asked Pete Weber about Ryan Ellis, he said he thought that he could be in the mix.
What I've heard about Ryan Ellis is Laviolette is a huge fan of his. That he's the guy who Laviolette will not trade. That's I didn't bring that up at the time, but that's just what I've heard, and Pete would know better than me. But I've asked about Ellis before, and I've heard that from 2 or 3 people now that's the case, that Laviolette.
It depends who's on the other end,
Right. I'm not saying Laviolette's making the deal, Poyle's making the deals, but.
Yeah. It would be surprising, though, that after trading Jones that they would trade Ellis, too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Mike's right on that. That's the issue. I mean, you can always make a case that no one, everyone could be traded for the right deal. That's certainly true. But Mike's thought there is the right one, that they had one of the deepest defenses, but if they move Ryan Ellis, now all of a sudden they're like everyone else.
Exactly.
Right. So. Now, it sounds like we might be missing the MVP altogether, kids, because we're sitting there, we're talking about this guy, we're talking about that guy. Did you see this? Let me show you this. I think we're missing it. So last night, Sidney Crosby.
No, come on.
It makes with another huge night. This is a huge.
10th to 5th, he has.
He's in 5th in spring.
No. He's gone from 37th.
37th to 5th.
Yeah, and he's climbed. I mean, in my mid-season report, at that point, I think he was, God, I can't remember now how many points he was out of the top 10, but he's made it up in a big way. Like, he's suddenly playing like the old Crosby. Now, he's not MVP worthy, but he is really stepping it up, to be sure.
Obviously, if he keeps this pace up for the remainder of the season, they make the playoffs, then that's a whole different story. But right now, he's not in the mix.
There's nobody happier to hear that, Dan, than Lou Lamoriello and the Toronto Maple Leafs, because they get their first.
That's right. If they make the playoffs, right? They get the pick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I mean, I've learned not to doubt Crosby in situations like this. I mean, just when you think he's out of it, I mean, and I am, this is a Flyers fan telling you this, guys, that Crosby absolutely can take.
If it wasn't for Marc-Andre Fleury, though, they wouldn't even be close.
No, that's true, but they are. Marc-Andre Fleury's been amazing, but don't count out Crosby's ability to keep scoring at this pace. And then if he catches, if he does pass everybody in scoring, and they do win the Eastern Conference or something crazy like that, which I don't think is going to happen, he's got to be thought about.
But we have to give Jim Rutherford a little bit of credit here, because not only I think the Daly deal, because Daly has helped him on the blue line.
Absolutely.
He's a good skater, and their defense was relatively immobile before that deal. Imada stayed healthy. Letang has come back, but the addition of Daly has helped him. And the Hagelin deal.
Yes.
Perron is playing good in Anaheim. Hagelin is playing good in Pittsburgh. It's given them a level of speed. He's a guy who can play top 9 role. It's helped that team. So you can't ignore the fact that those tweaking moves have really helped them.
And Sullivan too. I mean, what was
move, yeah.
What was Johnson doing with Crosby? I mean, was he making them sleep on a bed of nails at night? I mean, like, what's happened here?
You have to let the horses out of the barn and let them run.
I agree.
That's both Malkin and Crosby have been much better offensive forces since Sullivan took over. He is considered a Laviolette style of coach.
Yeah.
By that I mean he will let the boys skate and get up and down the ice, and that's really made a big difference. And I think those little things. Trevor Daley still scares me defensively. I've watched a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not so sure that I'm completely buying that that's a huge help for the Penguins, but he has contributed offensively.
Now, but you're right.
Another small thing, Chris Kunitz was woken up.
So
because if Crosby wakes up, Kunitz works.
Well, here's the thing.
I think waking up. I think part of Crosby waking up is the fact that Kunitz actually started to get it together too.
That's fair.
Which ties into Hagelin, in my opinion, because when they bring in Hagelin, they put that Hagelin-Kessel-Malkin line together, and that takes the Kessel pressure off of Crosby, which I think was also weighing on him. So now he doesn't have to deal with, and he can just go back to being himself, which proves my point that Crosby does not need line mates. Well, and everybody spends their entire time trying to come up with line mates for him that are better, and like Team Canada's done it, and the Penguins have done it, and at the end of the day, he's better off just putting him with players who won't get in his way, but who will actually help him work.
Needs the right kind of line mates, and Hornquist has always played well with him. And they tried the Kessel experiment, and that didn't work. Kessel played better with Malkin, and then, as you said, when Hagelin comes in, that's a pretty good unit. But Hornquist played better traditionally with Crosby over Malkin.
Yes.
Two things about one about Hagelin. Like, if you expect Hagelin to come in and score 20 goals for you, you're going to be disappointed in him. He's not a natural scorer. But what he does do, and it is so amazing to me how this all works, and we've all seen this phenomena, you bring in a really fast guy, and suddenly it makes your whole team faster. And you see it with Darren Helm, who's not a great offensive player, but the Red Wings are faster when he's healthy. Mm-hmm. And they play at a higher pace. And I don't know why that is, but it does seem to be true. And the same with the Penguins. Hagelin has made that team play faster for whatever reason, and they do. And but the other thing I wanted to go back and I'm just constantly amazed, and I'm going to sound like a Crosby apologist, and maybe I am because I do like the guy. But when this was all going on, I read so many stories and heard so many people. I even had a general manager tell me, I'm watching Crosby, and he's not the same player. He's not the same player. He's got too many miles on him. The injuries are taking its toll. And I saw stories about that. Writers suggest about that. This was the end of Crosby, and really all it was the way that the team was being coached. That wasn't a good fit for him or for Malkin. Malkin handled it a little better, I thought. But once they changed coaches, if you look, once they sort of figured out the way Sullivan was going to work, Crosby's offense has been back. Malkin has been much better. Letang the other night, it was his show as well. I mean, they're utilizing their defensemen and asking them to be more involved in the play, it seems to me, because they're moving up the ice. But obviously, the addition of Daley has made a impact on that as well. But sometimes it's, we look for complicated reasons when it's really a simple thing of, hey, the coach is not allowing him to play the way that he plays best.
Here's the other thing, too, about Hagelin. He'll always get you double-digit goals, and they're all going to be even strength. He is a half a point a game guy for his career. It just
at even strength
in Anaheim, but he can play. I mean,
and he's a good player, but he just, I remember seeing when he made the trade to Anaheim, I saw a writer say, well, you pencil him for 20 goals. Well, no, you don't.
I think he's he's like a 40-point guy. He's like a 16 and 25, but it's all at even strength. So that's pretty valuable.
Yeah, but he's also a good checker and a pretty good penalty.
Good penalty killer too. He'll get shorthanded chances, but I think what Kevin's right though, just that spark plug, it's like using better gasoline. Just give your the car a little more pep to it, and the team looks faster with him in the lineup. I agree 100%.
Well, it does back the defense off. I mean, Russ can attest that if you have one guy or two guys that's fast, the defensemen are more mindful, and they back off a little bit. They just respect the speed. So gives everybody a little more room.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody thinks that Rutherford is done. I think
No.
No, not at all.
I mean,
No,
there's
no.
glaring holes on defense, so of course he's not done.
But they got zero room. I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to have to make a trade for trade. I mean, they're in the worst cap position heading into the trade deadline, according to general manager.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. So what happened 50 years ago today? We'll end this with this. This is a
You could say it. Go ahead.
big day. Come on, 50 years ago. Adam Kimmelman had a really good story today on this. NHL.com. 50 years ago today,
they announced the
Board of Governors announced the six expansion teams.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. I mean, that's to Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and St. Louis, all got their and the NHL doubled from the original 6 to the original 12, as I like to call it. Which definitely.
Which nobody calls it that, by the way. Nobody.
I like to call it that because the original 12 I think is significant because it's 50 years now. I mean, they've been for 50 years. Once they're 50 years, they get called something. Come on.
But it's not the original 12 because orially there weren't 12. You got to call it something else.
Originally there weren't 6 either. So that's if you want to get technical here. The original 6.
Yeah, we really make way too big of a deal of original 6. I'm sorry.
We do. I told you we do.
Yeah.
Sort of tied to this though, Ak. I mean, we last week they announced LA getting the All-Star game. On the weekend, it was coming out that they think that the Winter Classic is going to be in St. Louis, who's also celebrating their 50th anniversary. And now I know that there's still something going on, whether it's a Heritage Classic like Russ said or just another outdoor game, that Toronto is going to get something. But they're saying Chicago, St. Louis might be the game at Busch Stadium in St. Louis.
Well, especially since the proposed date for the St. Louis game is January 2nd. So obviously they're going to do something on the 1st.
Right.
Maybe. Yeah. Now, do you know who was at the table when it was decided? Do you know who the owners were of those teams? It's really interesting. These are great hockey names. I mean, these are really good. So Clarence Campbell's running the whole thing, of course. So he's running the whole thing. And the president were Charles Adams of the Boston Bruins. James Norris of the Chicago Blackhawks.
Right.
Bruce Norris of the Detroit Red Wings. Were they related, Kevin? Bruce and James.
Brothers. Yeah, the Norris family. I mean, that was one of the great scandals of the era. Is that these teams would help each other because they were all in the family, and some of these players from Detroit were traded to Chicago just because they needed help, and
I never knew that. That's interesting.
Wow.
Conn Smythe of the Maple Leafs.
Conn Smythe of the Maple Leafs. William Jennings of the Rangers.
Yep.
And David Molson of the Montreal Canadiens. So that was those 6, and Clarence Campbell sat down and decided that they would expand the NHL, which is very significant.
From what I had read and heard, there was the NHL perceived a threat from the Western Hockey League, that they thought that they would be some significant competition for them, and that's why they went the road of expanding 6 markets, sort of like what they did in when they gobbled up the 4 teams from the WHA. The WHA was falling apart, but they also they knew that there were markets there that another league could come in and maybe take advantage of, so that's why they did it.
Yeah. Now, for those of you thinking that expansion is taking a long time in Seattle or Las Vegas or Quebec, they first raised the idea of expansion in 1946. So,
wow. Okay. So they were thorough. They're very thorough.
And it was a 19-year excursion into or 20 years basically into trying to figure this out.
Well, there was a rubber shortage because of the war, so they had to get they had to make.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and 2 teams that were rejected were got brought in 1970. Buffalo got rejected for the original for the next 6.
Right.
So did Vancouver.
Right.
And so did Cleveland and Louisville. That also, according to this article, and I thought that was Cleveland did have a team for a brief period of time, right? But
now Buffalo probably got blocked, right, because of Toronto. I think that's why that got slowed down.
Yeah. Well, there's always been that. I believe that was the case. But
that's what I've always believed.
Yeah, it's really it is fascinating. I mean, it was the thing was basically driven by the fact they wanted to put teams in the West. So San Francisco and LA were the 2 teams they were definitely going to put in. That's the way at least this reads. And that San Francisco team, obviously the California Golden Seals. did not cease from existing, and now have become part of what team?
The Dallas Stars.
That's right.
That's right. Very good. Excellent.
Were the Gunn brothers the original owners of the Seals? No, Charlie Finley. Well,
Finley was.
Finley.
I don't know.
It was Finley.
Yeah, Charlie Finley, yeah.
With his famous white skates
The
and
white skates, yeah.
crazy stuff.
I actually like those jerseys. I liked the California Golden Seals jerseys.
Oh, you know me. I projected that they for the outdoor game that the San Jose Sharks should wear California Golden Seals jerseys that just said Sharks across them instead of Seals. I thought that would have been fantastic. But
That'd be really cool, actually.
Do you know how much does it say there how much the expansion teams paid?
no, I didn't see that. I did not see that. I do remember in the Flyers story, it's $200,000, I thought, or something like that.
No, it's $2 million. It's $2 million bucks.
$2 million. Okay. Wow. No, I did not know that. That's really something.
That was a bargain.
Yeah, I remember Ed Snyder talking about how he had to borrow money from the bank to get his team and all this stuff, and that's a famous story.
Yeah.
In Philadelphia, but and that's so yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I really do consider. I think there needs to be some kind of mention to those teams that we put the original six into some kind of great spot, but we never talk about these teams. I know a couple of them aren't around anymore.
The next wave. That's it. That's all you got.
Speaking of cost of franchises, the one that I always remember because it's just so dramatic now when you see the value of franchises. Do you know what Mike Ilitch paid for the Red Wings and when he bought it from the Norris family in 1981?
Jeez, I bet you it's a bargain. It's probably like Steinbrenner buying the Yankees for like $20 million.
Yeah, it was $9 million.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Russ has that in his cupboard.
And the interesting thing about that is that, and I've written this story several times in books, but at one point, Mrs. Ilitch, Marion, who was as much a partner as anyone. I mean, it really was a husband-wife team. When they bought it, they were told there were several thousand season ticket holders, but when they actually investigated, they found out it was like 1,400 or 1,300 or something like that. Wow. And what they did was, the Ilitch is a large family, and they had all the family members, and they one by one they started calling them on the telephone, all the people that had been season ticket holders before, and that's how they sort of built it up. And then Mike Ilitch gave a car away at every game, and in those days, I mean, I was going as a fan. This was in the early '80s. And there'd be just a few thousand people, so your odds of winning a car were actually
those are pretty good odds.
Yeah. But you really could have shot a cannon there, and in certain sections you wouldn't have hit a soul. So
there's a great story in here that comes from Jay Greenberg's book, and it's in this article too. So Ed Snyder goes and makes his presentation in front of the board and says, yeah, we've got 15,000 seat arena we're going to put up there. We've got 3 other major professional sports teams in Philadelphia, and James Norris pounds his fist on the table saying Philadelphia's a lousy sports town, and that it should never go there. So but the amount of stuff out there.
Now, how is that possible when baseball has been there for over 120 years? Come on.
Yeah, and football's been there since what, the 20s, 30s?
Yeah, I mean, come on.
I think people.
Well, the one thing about Philly, though, I will say, most of the scary incidents that I've seen at sporting events have actually happened in Philadelphia. But in the final, I saw a group of when the Blackhawks and Flyers were playing. I actually witnessed walking up to the arena a Chicago Blackhawks fan being knocked to the sidewalk. Now, this is the thing that was so amazing. In front of a police officer from Philadelphia who just left. They came along, cuffed this guy in the back of the head and knocked him flat. And I walked over to kind of help the guy up, and there was a police officer there just shaking his head laughing. He was, But anyway, the story I wanted to bring up, not that one, but that's actually a true story. I once, carried on the tradition of writing. Well, they actually booed Santa in Philadelphia, and when I've used that, I've gotten usually some emails from, why are you bringing that up? That was in the whole story and all that. But I was actually at a Chicago Bears game, a year ago where it actually happened again. There was a race between Santa and Santa's helper, and it was at halftime of a game, and Santa was winning the race and paused in the true tradition of cross country and waited for Santa's helper to come up and then held hands with her and they crossed together. And all the Chicago Bears fans stood and booed. And the guy behind me, because I seemed perplexed while they were booing, he said, "We played a win in this house, Santa. We haven't played a tie."
Santa's never had the killer instinct that he needs.
The last time the Bears won was like '85, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
I was always told of Philadelphia booing Santa because that Santa was a fraud. It was just like some hobo. It was like, yeah, there's some hobo dressed up and.
No, it was just on the other day. There was a TV thing on here. We saw this thing. It was 1946, believe it or not, which I thought it was way later than that. It seems like something that happened in the 70s. It happened in 46.
Yeah. What?
The Santa snowball incident.
It was at Penn, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was at Penn Stadium, or Franklin Field they call it, and so it was there, and it was a Santa in like a green Santa Claus costume.
Yeah. Yep.
And but because it was the Eagles, right? So the thing
That's right.
was, I'll be a Santa, but I'll wear a green costume, so that'll be cool. And people threw snowballs at him and didn't like the idea. That was.
And the Eagles were terrible and losing by 40 points.
Before we finish,
Yeah.
Renaud Lavoie from TVA Sports is reporting that Justin Schultz is being scratched tonight against New Jersey,
Uh-oh.
and it might be trade related. So we may have another
We just
deal.
talked about Schultz yesterday. I feel like they are going to get rid of him.
So that
Well, Toronto just made space, and his buddy is there.
no. Mike Babcock actually likes defensemen.
If you want to guarantee the first overall pick, you trade for Justin Schultz.
Mike Babcock actually likes defensemen who can play defense.
There's something about Mike Babcock today that no coach has been able to say in, I don't know, 30 years. Do you know what that is?
So Ranger fans are hoping it's not Justin Schultz for Keith Yandel. I'm sure they're hoping that.
Yeah.
Oh,
You know what that is? That Mike Babcock can say that no NHL head coach has been able to say for probably, I don't know, maybe more, 30 years, 20 years, I don't know. A long time.
Waiting for this. Go ahead.
He's the highest paid Maple Leaf.
Oh, that's funny.
He's higher paid than any player on his team. What NHL coach can say that?
Well,
Or has ever been able to say that in a long time? I
but
mean,
right, like I said, right now the top 3 forwards on the team, actually the top 4 forwards on that team: Nathan Horton, long-term injury; James Van Riemsdyk, IR; Lupul, IR; Bozak, injured.
Yeah, but what's Horton's contract on the LTIR? Is it higher than Babcock's yearly? It could be.
No.
I don't think it is. It's like around 5, right?
it's not. Yeah. No, he is the highest paid player on his team, which is not. I can't remember that.
$6.5 million. Yep.
That's crazy. I mean, that's just insane. That's all the time we have, guys, for today. Remember, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will be back again tomorrow to discuss a 12-player trade between 2 teams to be named later.
I hope so.
We'll talk to you then.